Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a good few different styles, but if people were to ask me about this brewery, I would say that they're probably best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, and also for their big, fruity, juicy, modern, Nordic, smoothie, whatever we're going to call them, sour beers. So if these are two beer categories that catch your interest, then this is one of the Swedish breweries that I would highly recommend that you check out. Now, the beer we're going to have a look at today is one of their latest releases through Systembolaget here in Sweden. It's a style that I know these guys can do very well, and this one is supposed to be a very nice example of that style. So, needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up toward Gothenburg once again, Göteborg as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in when we review the Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition these days. But for this review then, we are going to return to the wonderful Duckpond Brewing. So this particular beer is called Don Don. It comes in at 8% ABV, and this is another New England hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, this beer was released as part of the Lokalt was Moskalvik assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for June of 2023. And I think this was the only one they released this month, if memory serves me correctly. Otherwise, there might have been a sour beer as well, but it was this one that caught my eye, and it has been a wee while actually since we've had a Duckpond hazy. So that was the main reason behind wanting to try this one. But yeah, let's crack on with it then and see what it's all about. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Duckpond Brewing before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Swedish playlist along with a number of other things, and you can of course check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you once again about Duckpond Brewing. So, Duckpond Brewing were originally known as Mikrofonbryggeriet, or the Microphone Brewery as it would be in English, and this company is the brainchild of Nikola Sarcevich, who is a singer and songwriter for the band Millencolin, who have been making music since 1993. So the band was originally based in Örebro out to the west of Stockholm, but then they took a break, and at this point Nikola moved over to Gothenburg. But in 2013 he began home brewing with his friend Christian Silva during his time studying international marketing in Skövde, and the two were just brewing very small 20-litre batches together. But it went quite well, they found they really enjoyed it, and they started to take it a little bit more seriously, and so Nikola went down to Berlin in Germany to do a 2-week brewing course. But the two then started the company together, and it was based for a while in Nikola's house, and at this point they were brewing 200-litre batches. But they changed their name in the summer of 2019, because they felt Mikrofonbryggeriet was a little bit hard for foreigners to kind of spell and to remember and stuff like this, and they decided to go with something that was a little bit more friendly, hence the English friendly, so hence the name Duckpond Brewing. But over the last few years they've been working to increase their output and their international sales, and that year in 2019 they produced around 70,000 litres, and these guys were also one of the co-owners of the Wizard Brewing brand along with Morgendagens, who now are sadly no more. But originally they were producing most of their commercial beers at Poppels Bryggeri in Jonsered and at Odd Island, who, if I remember correctly, are in Mölndal to the south of the city. But these days they've got their own premises in Kungston, and they've recently hired Magnus Laurén to come in as their head brewer, and he's been helping them kind of develop and get more beers out there, which has been quite exciting. But like I said to you, over the years these guys have really made a name for their kind of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, and also for their kind of modern, fruity, juicy Nordic sour beers, however you want to call them. And they've done a couple of other styles though. We've had a couple of lagers from them, if I remember correctly. I'm sure we had a West Coast IPA from them at one stage as well. But yeah, Duckpond are a very, very solid brewery these days, but very popular because of the two main types of beers that they do. But as of June 2023, when I'm filming this one for you, there have been 80 beers released under the Duckpond name, and before that there was about 20 or 25 were released under the Microphone Brigadier name. So yeah, they've produced about 100 beers in total, there or thereabouts. But yeah, as I say, that's everything I can really tell you about Duckpond Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and see how we go. So, yeah. This one, the can art looks very nice, quite different actually. I was kind of just looking at it through the viewfinder there, so it kind of reminds me of like tie-dye or something like that, or some of these really interesting marble things and stuff like that you can get. But yeah, plain silver top on the can there, it looks very nice, and as you can see on the back there is the Duckpond Brewing symbol, but I don't think it's going to focus all that well. But as you can see, this one is a little 330 milliliter can. I wonder if this one was produced down at Odd Island, but I have noticed that Duckpond have been doing more and more 330 milliliter cans recently, as opposed to the big 440s that we're used to with these guys. So I'm not sure what the exact reason is. So I'm guessing they'll be producing a number of their own beers in their own place now, but also still doing stuff at in Jonsered and Mölndal with Popos and Odd Island as well. But yeah, 330 milliliter can, this one. If memory serves me correctly, this beer cost me 40 Swedish kroner, which translates to about €4, £3.50 sterling, somewhere in the region of like $4.75 American, something like that with the current exchange rates. But yeah, anyway, it looks very nice. As we said earlier, it's called Don Don, 8% New England Hazy Imperial Double IPA. This one is hopped with Nelson Sauvin, Galaxy and Mosaic, so you've got a little bit of New Zealand, Australia and America respectively with those hops. Nelson Sauvin is of course your New Zealand one, 16% alpha acid, usually big oily kind of gooseberry, white, green grapey notes out of that. Galaxy is Australian, 14% alpha acid, big pungent passion fruit and quite a lot of juicy mango and some pineapple usually. And then Mosaic is American, 14% alpha acid, nice big oily tangerines and a distinctive very slight earthy character. But yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass then and see how we go. Nothing else we really need to say about Duckpond Brewing or the technical aspects of the beer itself. So we'll get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. So there we go. I'll tell you something, when you open this one up, the smell is absolutely lovely. But yeah, this one looks great, I have to say. So as you can see, we'll take a look at the head before it disappears. But you can see this beer is poured with about 1.5 fingers of a frothy, very slightly cream tinted head there. That is of course going to fade away as time goes on, but you can see this is nice kind of small, kind of medium sized bubbles there on the surface of the beer, a few bumpier ones in the middle and a few kind of medium sized ones the further up you go. But just, you can have a little look at that through the camera and see that it looks very, very nice. But as you can see, colour wise, this beer's got a lovely, very kind of pale kind of tropical fruit juice note to it. I'd compare that to like a sort of pineapple and mango juice or something like that. I always like comparing the appearances of New England IPAs to different fruit juices because that's just what they remind me of. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will also affect the colour as well. But yeah, you don't often have to care about that with IPAs, to be honest with you. But yeah, the level of haze in this one for an 8%er is pretty damn impressive actually. This one's pretty opaque. So remember, the haze in these beers, the level of haze is dependent on the oak content, wheat content, and to a degree what yeast you use as well. So that's worth bearing in mind. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of that head there, but overall it does look very, very nice. Yeah, a few little bits of kind of sediment at the bottom of this one, but otherwise this one looks pretty much as you would expect from a New England hazy. I don't think there's anything else we really need to say about the appearance of this beer. So let's have a little look at the aroma of this one then and see what it's going to have in store for us. Oh yeah, that smells very nice actually. It's one of the more, I think this one is quite an oaty leaning New England IPA, so it's kind of oaty and barley malt leaning, I would say, but soft fruity juiciness, leans toward the grassy side of the things on the spectrum as well. But yeah, there are a few things to think about when it comes to New England IPAs. For me, when it comes to the malty and yeasty side of things, there are 6 elements to look at. So you have the sort of, for me, you have the sort of yeasty, farmhousey type character and the rye leaning grainy side of things. Those are a bit more prominent in American brewed New England IPAs, such as like Alchemist and things. That's how the style was originally. It was a bit more farmhousey and yeasty. But you also have wheaty bitiness, oaty creaminess, barley malt bread, and the sweeter side of things. And that's really where the European take on the New England style has evolved. Most of the European ones lean a little bit more toward those 4 elements. But like I said, for me, this one is more barley malt leaning, and it's more oaty, actually, just on first impression. But let's try and break this one down then and describe what's actually going on in the aroma a little bit more. So the backbone of the beer, absolutely, you have a little bit more of that kind of fresh, you've got that sort of fresh, I would say, yeah, that fresh hedgehog white bready bread crust in there. I think that goes together really, really nicely. So yeah, fresh white bready doughy bread crust in there. I like that about this one. But yeah, on top of that, you've got a nice little bit of a sort of wholemeal. You do have a little tiny bit of like a sweeter wholemeal brown bread, and you've got a little bit of cracker as well. And there's maybe a tiny little element of woodiness out of this one, which is interesting. The one thing I would say as well about the aroma of this beer is that the more that you smell of the malty side of things, you do get a little bit more wheat out of this one. So in the back of the nose, there is a little bit of that kind of wheaty bitiness, and the way that that goes together, I think, is very, very nice. So yeah, nice little bit of wheaty bitiness in there, and yeah, that does go together nicely. But yeah, above the kind of wholemeal brown bready character, you've got a good little bit of a kind of how would we say? You start to get that like fluffier white bready character, and then above that you can smell the wheat just densifying the thing out, and then you get the oats out of this one. And for me, actually, I'd be curious to know exactly how fresh this beer is. But yeah, it says it was canned on the 3rd of the 5th, 2024. So this is quite interesting. So we're drinking this one when it's it's been in the can just over a month, which is decent enough for Systembolaget, because it was released, I want to say they released these beers on like the 5th of June this month, if I remember correctly. So it's been released a month after it's been put in the can, and these beers quite often need maybe 2-3 weeks in the can just to mellow out. I always find if you drink New England's too fresh, you just get green, to be honest with you. But yeah, for me, this beer, the oats are interesting, and as I've always said with New England IPAs, oats can be a good indicator of how fresh your New England IPA is. You know, the fresher it is, the creamier the oats smell, the older the beer is, the drier the oats tend to be. But I get quite a lot of oaty dryness out of this one, which is kind of interesting. Like, just in the middle of the nose, there's just a lot that the oaty character, it smells a little bit sweet, but at the same time it smells almost kind of slightly powdery and dry. So for me, that's kind of unusual. It could just be the wheat. It could be that the wheat's coming out a little bit more, or they've used a slightly different type of wheat in this one, because it does list corn, veta, or havre, so yeah, barley, wheat and oats in this one. But yeah, this one kind of goes against what I've said about New England IPAs for a while, because like I say, it's only 1 month old apparently. Although this one is probably about 5 or 6 weeks old, so yeah. But I do find you get quite a little bit of oaty dryness out of this one, which is kind of unusual. There is a little touch of like, there is a wee touch of like a a Werther's original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing to this one. But yeah, it's interesting. It really is quite interesting in that sense, I have to say. I do like that it's got a wee bit of quirkiness to the malt base actually. So yeah, so that's interesting, this one. But I think that's everything we need to say about the malty side of this beer, to be honest with you. Let's focus on the hoppy side of things, the green component, and then the fruit, as we always do. So yeah, for me, in the green component with this beer, as you would expect, you get a nice little bit of earthiness from this one, which will be the mosaic, but then the beer has a very bright floral aromatic component to it, and some nice little grassy notes coming out of the beer too. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together in that sense, I think, is really very nice. So yeah, nice little bit of bright grassiness in there, nice little bit of floral aromaticity, and you've also got that wee touch of earthiness too. So yeah, that's that really is quite interesting, this one. Yeah, but as I always say, one thing you have to remember about New England IPAs, when it comes to the green components, they always tend to be a little bit brighter and more grassy. Because remember, when you brew IPAs, you have 3 types of hopping. So if we use a 90-minute wort boil as our model, early addition hopping takes place within the first hour of the wort boil, and that gives you a lot of kind of bitterness in your beer, and it also gives you this deeper, danker aroma. Late addition hopping is within the last half hour of the wort boil. That gives you a lot of these brighter, kind of more grassy components, but it also gives you a little bit of bitterness, but mainly flavour and aroma. And then you've got dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete, and that's all about flavour and aroma. And again, it translates into a brighter, more kind of zesty green component. New England IPAs tend to rely on late addition and dry hopping, whereas West Coast IPAs use all 3. So that's one thing to bear in mind with these beers actually. So yeah, spilling a little bit on myself there. That's just how it goes. But yeah, you can definitely smell it. The green component in this one is very kind of bright and grassy in that regard. But yeah, in terms of the fruitiness, I will be honest and say it's pretty much what you would expect from these hops. You've got a little touch of a stronger passion fruit in there coming out of the Galaxy. You've got some nice juicy mango and a little bit of a more, yeah, you've got a little bit of passion fruit, nice kind of juicy mango. You've also got a wee bit of a kind of more pineapple-y note in this one as well. But yeah, it's kind of interesting in that sense, I would say. So yeah, a little bit of, as I say, a little bit of I get a bit of the kind of papaya and apricot-y sort of things too, which I didn't really expect from Galaxy, but the tropical notes in this beer essentially are all coming from the Galaxy. I think that's fair to say. But Galaxy can be quite complex like that, and it's one of the few hops, I would say, that really works quite well on its own as a single hop. As a single hop beer, it's probably one of the most complex ones that you'll get when you use it in a single hop beer. But beyond that, you've got a little bit of the kind of oily gooseberry, white green grapey notes that you'd expect of the Nelson Sauvin, and then, of course, you have the kind of oily tangerine orangey notes from the mosaic as well. But I do get a little touch of a limey character coming out of this one. So yeah, the way it goes together, I think, is really quite interesting. So it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, I think the way this one goes together is really quite interesting. So, as I always say, take a wee bit of time and just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think this could be very nice. My first double IPA, or New England IPA from Duckpond in a wee while. But let's get stuck into this one now. This one is the Don Don, an 8% New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Duckpond Brewing in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Oh yeah. It's quite interesting actually. This one's got a lot more dryness and graininess to it than I think we've had from a Duckpond beer in a wee while. I wonder. Yeah, you're getting a little bit of that real dry note out of this one into the aftertaste. But yeah, otherwise, it's very creamy and very juicy, quite floral leaning as well. But yeah, you have got a good little bit of grainy kind of dryness out of this one the further into it that you go. It's a nice New England double IPA, this one for sure, but a wee bit different from what I remember having had from Duckpond before. This one's not quite as sort of sweet in a sense. And if I was to try this one blind, I would probably wonder if there's a little bit, if there had been a little bit of rye or something like that in it. But yeah, you certainly get more and more dryness and almost toastiness out of this beer the further into the aftertaste that you go. So yeah, interesting stuff. Gets a thumbs up from me. Yeah, but let's break this beer down and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth as we always do. So yeah, the backbone of this beer then, the middle third of your palate, you've got a really nice kind of, you have got a really nice kind of sort of toasty, very slightly well-fired bread crust forming the backbone of this beer. Well, relatively well-fired, it's not black, but I do get like quite a dry, slightly well-fired bread crust, you know, just forming the backbone of this beer. As you go further forward on that middle third of your palate, there's a little tiny bit of woodiness in there. And that's quite interesting. There's a little smattering of like Jacob's cream cracker or knäckebröd in there too. Like the backbone of this beer in that middle third of the palate is actually pretty grainy. So above that layer, you get a little bit of the kind of wholemeal, brown bready character coming out of this one. So yeah, absolutely a nice little bit of kind of wholemeal, brown bready character coming out of this one. And then you have, above that, you start to get the fluffier white bread, which I think is really nice too. So yeah, wholemeal kind of brown bready character out of this one, a little bit of a kind of fluffy white bread, as I say. And then you can feel the wheat. The wheat sits above that, and the wheat actually has a little bit of bitiness and a little bit of zip in this beer, which I find quite interesting. So you have a little bit of a zippy and densifying wheaty character sitting above the white bread, and then you get the oats out of this one. So down the middle line of your palate, the oats are really quite smooth and quite creamy. You can feel there, but as you move further out toward the edges of your palate, you do get a wee bit more of a, yeah, you get a little bit more of a kind of dry, oaty, powdery type character out of this one. So yeah, I like how that goes together. So yeah, nice little bit of a kind of creamy, oaty note out of this one. As I say, and then in the middle, it just gets drier and drier as you go out toward the edge of the palate, but a bit of the zippiness of the wheat is kind of pushing through that as well. In the dead centre of your palate, you do get a little bit of that kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of sweetness, which is obviously the alcohol pushing its way out of the beer. But yeah, other than that, I think I've said everything that we, really need to about the middle third of the palate there. I think it goes together quite well. So yeah, on the I think we can move on to the back third of the palate then. So the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of kind of bready build up in there, which is good. So yeah, nice little bit of sort of bready build up. You've got a wee touch of a kind of like brown bready character in the base and a bit more of a white bready character on top of that. But then, yeah, as I always say, in the back third of the palate, the flavours are quite similar. They just come out in different intensities. But remember, the general trend with the back third of your palate is that you know, you get more bitter and darker flavours at the back of the palate. The sweeter flavours come out further forward, and this beer is no exception to that. So you can feel the kind of dry bread crust in there. for sure, and it is drier than it is in the middle third of the palate. You've got a little bit more cracker in there, which is drier too. You've got the fluffy layer of kind of wholemeal brown bread, which is a little bit drier, and then above that you've got this really fluffy white bready kind of note as well. And again, they're a bit taller and a bit more airy, both of those bready layers. And above that, you can feel the wheat just creeping in there and giving you a little bit of a sort of spicy character too. So yeah, the way that this goes together is quite nice. So yeah, the wheaty character in there is really nice. So you've got that lovely kind of bitey wheaty note just sitting above everything there on that on top of that back third of the palate. But you've got a nice little bit of you have got a nice little bit of yeasty character sitting above that. So you have this sort of farmhousey white bready character. It's a little bit bread. Yeah, it's got a little bit of a kind of crackery and woody type note to it, and then it's wrapped in a little bit of a more kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity a wee bit of a McVitie's digestive biscuity kind of honeycomb type thing. I always get a bit of honeycomb in the back third of the palate for some reason, but yeah, you can feel that. But definitely back third of the palate, the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together a little bit more. So yeah, I like how that pieces together. I do like that about this one. But yeah, for me, I think that covers the back and middle third of your palate with this one quite well. On to the hoppy side of things then. The more that I drink of this one, actually, the more floral and sort of it has a little bit more dankness and stuff to it as well, which is interesting. So I wonder if they've used a wee bit of early edition hop in this one as well. But anyway, back corners of the palate, you do get a nice little bit of earthiness in this one, which is good. As you move further forward, you get a little bit of herbal character, but very quickly you get a little bit of a deeper, danker, more slightly piney resin note to this one, which could come from any of the three hops in this beer, in fairness, if you use them as early edition hops. But yeah, you've got a bit of a deeper, danker sort of thing there, and as you push toward the front corners of the palate, it's definitely a little bit more floral and aromatic, and then round the front curve of the tongue, it's a wee bit lighter and more grassy, I would say. So yeah, it goes together really nicely. So yeah, nice little bit of kind of oily and wet green component in there. So yeah, goes together really well in a sense. But yeah, I think in terms of the the front third of your palate, then let's have a wee look at this. So the border region between front and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of that kind of rye bread, more of a brown bready and white bready build up there. The base of that front third of your palate, you've got a little bit smoother, more like white bread crust, a little touch of brown bread, a little bit of white bread, and then above that you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, on the fruity side of things then, at the back of that front third of your palate, you do have a little bit of a stronger grapefruit there, which is going to come from the Galaxy, of course. Then it mellows out to give you a wee bit of a more passion fruit, and then as you reach the middle of that, front third of your palate, it's more like you've got a really kind of juicy mango and just like a wee touch of like apricot or papaya underneath and a bit of pineapple on top. So the Galaxy, I think, is giving you most of the complexity in this beer, to be quite honest with you. But yeah. As you move into the front half of the front third of your palate with this beer, you can feel the sort of the oily white green grapey characters out of this one from the Nelson Sauvin, and then above that you have the kind of more orangey tangerine notes from the Mosaic in this one. It went right in my head there. Was it Mosaic or was it Amarillo or whatever? But yeah, no, the Mosaic is the one that's giving you these kind of more orangey tangerine notes. So all three of the hops in this one are you know, doing what you would expect if you know these hops. I do wonder about the ratio in this. I wonder if it's maybe like 50% Galaxy and then 25-25 Mosaic and Nelson Sauvin, because I think the Galaxy is a little bit more prominent in this one than the other two. So yeah, that would be quite interesting to know, because yeah, this beer does lean a bit more toward the tropical side of things, especially in the beginning, but then you get a bit more of the kind of gooseberry type notes and the juicy orange the further into the aftertaste you go. But another very solid New England double from Duckpond. I'm not surprised with this one, but it does have a bit more dankness and a bit more graininess to it, I think, than some of the other examples that we've had from these guys in the past. But yeah, let's round off then with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So mouthfeel wise, this one for me is quite, yeah, this one for me is very kind of, I'd say it's kind of right, it's top end of mid-bodied, but carbonation is very, very smooth. It has a little bit of kind of creaminess to it and a little bit of slickness, but yeah, I think mid-bodied, top end is probably where this one lies. In terms of IBUs and things, I think this one's a little bit more bitter. I want to say this one's maybe about 60-ish IBUs. I do get more and more bitterness out of this one the further into the aftertaste that I go. So I do think there's been a little bit more early edition hop put in this one. It's one of the kind of more bitter and floral and dank New England doubles I remember from Duckpond Brewing. But yeah, the malt base, as we said, has a bit of graininess to it. You've got nice kind of smoothness and a little touch of sweetness from the bread, a little bit of creaminess and a wee bit of sweetness on top of that. But yeah, nice kind of juicy, fruity characters coming out from this one as well. Mainly tropical, I think, but then the other ones come out a little bit more. You get a bit more oily, fruity character out of this one the further into the aftertaste that you go. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This has been a really nice beer to try, actually. So it's a thumbs up from me, and cool to return to Duckpond after what feels like a good little while. So yeah, this was the Don Don, an 8% New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Duckpond Brewing in Gothenburg here in Sweden. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Duckpond Brewing as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the very near future. But until then, Slange, Skål, cheers, and I'll see you guys in the next review.